It is said that some of these towers are at a height of 9 meters, and that it was a huge fortress and thousands of people lived around it. Now, they tried to explain it away, and they said that the walls of this town became too heavy and they collapsed into a 12-meter deep cavern, and it fell down. But the Quran tells us how the town literally, that the earth swallowed it up, that it was literally taken down into the earth. The Americans want to say, no, it was built on a weak limestone cavern and it fell in. But the Quran tells us what happened to the people. فَصَبَّ عَلَيْهِمْ رَبُّكَ سَوْتَ عَذَابٍ. That the punishment came to them. But this is a very interesting study, and we are finding now that the stories that are coming in the Quran, this is not myth. These are not fantasy stories. This is real live history, which was played out and which is now coming to the surface even hundreds of years after the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. And so the perishing Arabs are the first group, and these groups have for the most part perished. The second group is Al-Arab Al-Aribah, and they are the children of Ya'rub ibn Yashub ibn Qahtan, Qahtaniyun. And they are the pure Arabs. And most of the linguists and historians believe that they came from the southern part of Arabia, which is Yemen. And that Yemen is actually the birthplace of the Arabic language. And up until today, and different people who speak Arabic will argue with you, but up until today, it is the Bedouins, the mountain people in Yemen, who are speaking a pure dialect of Arabic. Without grammar books, without going to school, the common language that they are speaking in the mountains of Yemen and some of the Sahara is a pure form of Arabic. The only problem is for us is they speak too fast. So you have to adjust your ears to the speed. But if you can catch their speed, then you realize that they are speaking a very high grammatical Arabic. And from amongst these Qahtaniyun, there were two famous tribes, Himyar and Kahlan. These are two well-known tribes. And from the tribes of Himyar, you find in the area of Sana'a, the present-day northern Yemen, and then going a little bit south, you will find there were great empires like the empire of Saba, that is known as Sheba. And so in this empire, they were able to subjugate water. They built the dam of Ma'rib, and the water was coming from the mountains. They were able to control this water, and they had one of the most powerful, well-known civilizations in the world at the time was right there in Yemen. Coffee comes from Yemen. Mocha comes from Yemen. Some people argue Ethiopia. But it went to the world out of Yemen itself. And so this is a very important part of the world, and we will see how important the people of Yemen are even up until today. If you look at the Kaaba itself, there is a Yemeni corner. That is how important the people of Yemen are to the history of Islam. In the northeast corner of the Arabian Peninsula is Al-Hira. And you will find a number of the tribes of Lakham and a number of those tribes in Hira. In the middle of Arabia, you can see on your old maps, there is what is called Najd. And the Najd are the Bedu, living in Sahara, in the middle of the Arabian Peninsula. For amongst the Najdis is Banu Tamim, Hawazin, Tayyi, Taqif, Banu Hanifa, and a number of tribes, and you will see them playing themselves out within the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, and they are fierce Bedouin tribes in the middle parts of Arabia, and it's part of the reason why Imam al-Shafi'i said, make dua qunut at Fajr every day, because of what happened with these tribes in the middle of Arabian Peninsula when the du'at were sent out and they were being killed. And so the Prophet ﷺ would make dua qunut in despair against what was happening in the central part of the Arabian Peninsula. In the southeast side of Arabia is Oman. Going to the south central side is Hadramaut, where you find Banu Kinda. And you will find in the area of Hadramaut that the people were famous for frankincense, which is a syrupy substance coming out of trees, which when it is hardened, you can chew it, luban, as gum, probably the world's first bubble gum. Also, it can be used as incense. And so this frankincense and myrrh and the spices coming out of Hadramaut were being used by the Roman Empire, by the Greeks, by the Egyptians, all the way to China. Everybody wanted this because when you burn it in your room, it cleans the atmosphere and it sets sort of a spiritual stage. So in religions all around the world, people were using these spices, and so the trade route would travel to the southern part of Arabia, from Hadramaut and Oman to Yemen, and then it would go north, up into Syria. And this is where you'll see later in Surah Al-Quraysh, رِحْلَةَ الشِّتَاءِ وَالصَّيْفِ. These are the journeys that were happening in the summer and the winter. They would go in the summertime up north to Syria, and they would get the different items, and then they would come south in the colder season, what would be cold up in the north. And so the second group is Al-Arab Al-Ariba. The third group is Al-Arab Al-Musta'riba. And this group are the Arabized Arabs. And they are basically the progeny of Ismail alayhi salam. And we know the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, and it's so important for us, especially in the time of Hajj. And we often speak about this story, that Ibrahim alayhi salam came out of Ur. He came from the Tigris-Euphrates region, on the west bank of the Euphrates. And he traveled around into Syria, and then down into Palestine, and into Egypt. And when he reached Egypt, the rulers of Egypt were so aggressive and so cruel that if they found a man who had a beautiful wife, if they knew that that woman was his wife, they would rape her and destroy his honor. But if the woman was his sister or his mother, then this wasn't a conquest for them. The wife was the conquest. And so when Ibrahim alayhi salam came into Egypt and they saw Sarah, they wanted to do an evil act with her, and Ibrahim gave them tawriyah, and this is a pious deception. And they said, "Who is this?" And he said, "It's my sister." Okay, meaning his sister in Islam, right, was his wife. But he said, "She's my sister," which she was. And so they let her go. Later on, through his character and the character of his wife, the leaders, the rulers at that time of Egypt were impressed by him. And they gave Sarah a servant woman named Hajar. Now, according to Al-Rahiq al-Makhtoum and some of the historians, she was actually from the royal family of Egypt, from the royal family of the Fara'ina, of the pharaohs. And but she was given as a servant to Ibrahim alayhi salam. Some of the people even say, some historians even say, that the rulers of Egypt at the time were Amalekah, who were Assyrians. They had conquered Egypt. They were originally from Iraq, same places as Ibrahim. So they were impressed by Ibrahim, and they gave him somebody from an Egyptian family. They were Iraqis themselves. And they gave him an Egyptian princess, take her as your servant. So there's a number of stories about this. In any event, what is important to us, which is so well known in our community, is that Sarah, may Allah be pleased with her, could not have children. And she allowed Ibrahim alayhi salam to take Hajar as a wife. And Hajar, later on when they left and went to Philistine, she gave birth to Ismail alayhi salam. Later on, for reasons that some historians say was the jealousy of Sarah, may Allah be pleased with her, Ibrahim left with Hajar and they went down into a desolate valley known as Bekka. Bekka. And the Quran still says Bekka al-Mubarakah. Later on, through language, Bekka became Mecca, because the ba and the meme are letters that are very close. The makhraj is very close. So it became known as Mecca, and it was in this desolate valley, as you so well know, that Ibrahim alayhi salam left his family, and by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, his wife Hajar, may Allah be pleased with her, ran in between Safa and Marwa 7 times. And then with the help of the angel, and the boy digging in the ground, the water came Zamzam. And they drank from the Zamzam. And one of the tribes that came from the south of the Qahtaniyin, remember, Al-Arab, Al-Ariba, the pure Arabs, one of the tribes known as Jurhum, came into the area of Mecca, and eventually they were so impressed by Ismail that they married him to one of their daughters. And so it is the coming together now in the family of Ibrahim alayhi salam that you see people from Iraq who are speaking a Semitic type of dialect, not Arabic. Then you see Hajar, who's an Egyptian, she's an African. And then you see a pure Arab from the Jurhum tribe. Ismail learns to speak Arabic, so they are Arabicized Arabs. They're not originally Arabic speaking. They have Iraqi blood, they have Egyptian blood, and they have the blood of the pure Arabs, which makes up that last category. And so later on, after the death of Hajar, radiallahu anha, rahimahullah, Ibrahim and Ismail, may Allah be pleased with them, built the Kaaba. Ibrahim alayhi salam called the people to come on foot and on any type of animal to do Hajj or pilgrimage to this house. Later on, Ismail had 12 sons. And it is from his family that spread around that you find the tribes of Quraysh, and you find the Aus and the Khazraj. You'll find many different people coming from the tribes of Ismail alayhi salam, this final form of Arab. What is important for us, the shahid here, which is so important for us in this early phase, Ibrahim alayhi salam built on the foundations of the Kaaba that were already there. And it is said that other prophets had been in this area. Ibrahim and Ismail built on the foundations. They established the Kaaba. And Allah tells us in Surah Ali Imran, مَا كَانَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ يَهُودِيًّا وَلَا نَصْرَانِيًّا وَلَكِنْ كَانَ حَنِيفًا مُسْلِمًا وَمَا كَانَ مِنَ الْمُشْرِكِينَ. Ibrahim was neither a Jew nor a Nazarene. See the Nasara? He was neither a Jew nor a Nazarene or Christian, but he was upright and he was a Muslim, and he was not from the polytheists. And so when we speak of Muslim, when we speak of Islam, and it's so important to keep this in your mind, especially when we are talking to non-Muslims, that we are talking about the religion of all the prophets. The Prophet Ibrahim is a prophet of Islam. The Prophet Musa alayhi salam is a prophet of Islam. Isa alayhi salam is a prophet of Islam. All of the messengers who came to Ad and Thamud, Mada'in Salih, and to all of the peoples of the world who taught the belief in one God, they are all mighty messengers of Allah, and they are part of the Islamic message. And we relate to them as one brotherhood. The only difference, as the Prophet, peace be upon him, said in authentic hadith, that the prophets are like a beautiful house, but there's one brick left. There's one space left for a brick. I am that brick. And with me is the seal of the prophets and the messengers. And so we need to now take it a step further in our next discussion, insha'Allah, to look deeper now into the lineage of the Prophet ﷺ. What was going on in Hijaz? What was going on amongst the Arabs? What are some of the names that we hear, Umayyah and Hashim, and some of the names of the different tribes which had such an influence on the message of Islam? May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the understanding and strength to study this, and may Allah help us to be as Ibrahim alayhi salam, Hanifan Muslima, وما كان من المشركين. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم على خاتم الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وآله وصحبه أجمعين وبعد. My beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Alhamdulillah, we are in our continuing study of the Seerah, the biography of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And we are trying to understand from the life of this man, peace be upon him, what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifested during his time and what was revealed to inspire us to the day of resurrection. And in order to fully understand what was revealed specifically in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, we need to first have a good foundation of the world before his time. So that in that way we can fully understand the revelation or the impact that the revelation had upon the people in the Arabian Peninsula and in the known world at that time. And the more we understand about history, the more we understand about the revelation. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not send this book down in isolation. The book was sent down to deal with real issues. And we will see that this Quran was sent down to deal with al-waqi'ah, the actual events that were happening to the people during this time, and also historical events were brought from the past. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about a people, it is not a fairy tale, but it is a real live historical issue that we need to understand. And the more we can confirm this, the more we understand it, is the more we will be able to, inshallah, apply it to our own world today. And so the Arabian Peninsula, Jazirat al-Arab, at that time the Arabian Peninsula was mostly unknown territory. And those people who ventured into the middle of the Arabian Peninsula found a wasteland. They found deserts. They found in the empty quarter, al-Ruba, al-Khali, they found one of the most dangerous places on earth. And so the people who lived in that area had to be independent. They had to be warlike in order to survive. Because if you get up in the morning and you look around and it's raining out and there are nice mangoes growing and the fruit is there and everything, you more than likely will be a temperate, you have an easygoing personality. Because Allah has provided things for you. But if you wake up in the morning and there's nothing in front of you but desert and rocks, sand and rocks, there is nothing, then you have to be strong and warlike and independent just to get up in the day and say to yourself, I will survive this day. And so that the personality of the Bedou, of the Arabs who lived in the interior, was a strong warlike personality, and it made life dangerous for those who would go into the interior. And so if you did not have an army with you, if you did not have strength with you, then you would not venture to the middle of Arabia. And so therefore, the information coming from the middle is very scarce. And it is not until the time of the Prophet ﷺ, when the Muslims opened up the center of Arabia, that direct communication happened with those wastelands. What does come to us, however, is that there were two major routes for trade. One was called the Eastern route for the people in Arabia, and that was the route that went from Iraq, that went from the Tigris and the Euphrates, and went across the Syrian desert and into Palestine. This is an important trade route. The other trade route was the Western route, and that was the one that went from Yemen in the south and then went north to Syria. And so these were the major routes that were moving in the Arabian Peninsula. And the people on the inside did not respect any laws. The main exception to the rule of the Arabian Peninsula was Yemen. Yemen today is defined as a country that you'll see just in the southwest side of Arabia. But in those days, there were different sections of Yemen, and it stretches right across the bottom part of Arabia. And the main people of Yemen at that time were Banu Himyar. They were intelligent people, they were clever people, and they succeeded in building the dam of Ma'rib. And this dam to block the water was so successful that they actually built skyscrapers. They literally had 5- and 6-story buildings. And if you go to Hadramaut today, in the south of Arabia, you will see still buildings, sometimes 6 to 7 stories. Now today, that's nothing. But 2,000 years ago, that was amazing. And so the people who lived in this area had great wealth. But the wealth also brought them chaos. Because their land was a land not only of trade, but it was a land of fighting. The powers of the world wanted to control that southwest corner, and it was very unstable. The last of the Yemeni kings was called Dhu Nuwas, and he disliked paganism. He disliked idol worship naturally. And when two of Bani Israel, two of the Yahud, migrated south to Yemen, he accepted Judaism. And so surprisingly enough, Judaism entered into the southern part of Arabia from an early time. And this is something that many of us don't understand in the relationship of the people of the book. But if you look at the history of Arabia, you look at the history of Egypt, and go right across the desert to Morocco and down in the Sahara, you will find that the Yahud positioned themselves in key areas where the gold was being traded. And so you find in Africa, you'll find the Yahud in the Sahara Desert, and they were part of Moroccan society for thousands of years because the gold was coming out of West Africa. So they positioned themselves in between West Africa and North Africa that traded with Rome and Greece. Similarly, they began to position themselves in the Arabian Peninsula because of this lucrative trade that was coming out of the south and going north. The south had frankincense, the spices. It had the what we call incense, frankincense and myrrh. It had coffee. It had mocha, chocolate. Many of the delicacies of the early world were actually coming from this area. And so, in Yemen, Judaism began to spread through the king. But Christianity also, and we had spoken earlier about Christianity, that the followers of Isa alayhi salam struggled and were persecuted, but there was a division between the Unitarian Church of the South, where people believed in one God, and the Church of the Trinity of the North, which was later controlled by the Byzantines in Rome. And so, in a place called Najran, and if you look to the maps, you will see Najran. In this place, Christianity, or that Unitarian version of Christianity, began to spread. And it is amazing to find out some of the stories, when we hear some of the stories of the people who were living in that area and what they went through. The Najrani people themselves had worshipped a great palm tree, and they saw spiritual force coming out of the tree. And a man by the name of Faymiyun accepted Christianity. He came from Syria, from that northern area, Palestine and Syria, where the Unitarian teachings of Tawheed still were alive. And so he started to migrate, and he was learning and teaching the belief in one God. And as history tells us, he was captured, he was enslaved, and he was brought to the south, to Najran. And on one occasion, his master looked at the room he was staying in and saw that it was lit up. There were lights in the room. And because of his prayers, we find that he was able to cure the sick. It is even reported that he was able to make the blind to see. And so when his master approached him, he told him, I can also destroy that tree. The tree that your people worship is not the true God. And so he was challenged by his master to destroy this idol, this false worship. And as history tells us, he purified himself and he made his prayer. He invoked a curse upon the tree, and a strong wind came and tore it out and cast it down. And so the people of Najran began to embrace Christianity. They began to go into the belief in one God. Now you remember that Isa alayhi salam was looked upon by the Jews as the enemy of their faith. His followers were called the Jews of Nazareth, the Nazarenes. And so this early faith was a danger to the Jewish rabbis who wanted to collect the gold and the silver. and did not want the spirituality. And so this belief began to spread in Najran. And Dhu Nuwas, the Jewish king, took over that area. And as our history tells us, and this is connected directly to our revelation, and there is a report in Sahih Muslim, a long hadith, and I want to share this with you so that we can live the story of how these early callers to the faith struggled and were striving to spread the belief in one God. It is reported by Shu'aib radiallahu an that Allah's Messenger sallallahu alayhi salatu wasalam said, among the people before you there was a king, probably Dhu Nuwas, and he had a sorcerer. When the sorcerer became old, he said to the king, I have now become an old man. Get me a boy so that I may teach him sorcery or magic. So the king sent a boy to him to learn sorcery. And whenever the boy proceeded to the sorcerer, he sat with a monk, Faymiyun. This is discussed by the people of Tafsir as being Faymiyun. So whenever he went to the sorcerer, he sat with the monk. And he listened to his talks. And he used to admire what the monk was saying. So when he went to the sorcerer, he passed by the monk and he sat there with him. And on visiting the sorcerer beat the boy. So the boy complained about that to the monk. The monk said to him, whenever you are afraid of the sorcerer, say to him, my people kept me busy. And whenever you are afraid of your people, say to them, the sorcerer kept me busy. So the boy carried on like that, making an excuse for being late for a period of time. Then there came on the road a huge creature, and the people were unable to pass the road. The boy said, today I will know whether the sorcerer is better or the monk is better. So he took a stone and he said, O Allah, if the deeds and the actions of the monk are liked by you better than the sorcerer, then kill this creature so that the people can pass the road. So he hit it with a stone and it was killed and the people passed the road. The boy came to the monk and informed him about it. The monk said to him, O my son, today you are better than I and have achieved what I see, but you will be put to a test. He told him, you've reached a certain level now. You will be put to a test. And in case you are put to trial, do not tell them about me. The boy used to treat the people suffering with blindness, leprosy, and other diseases. A blind servant of the king heard about the boy. He came and brought a number of gifts to the boy, and he said, all of these gifts are for you on the condition that you cure me. The boy said, I do not cure anybody. It is only Allah. It is the Creator alone who cures people. So if you believe in Allah and you call on Allah, He will cure you. He then believed in Allah and Allah cured him. Later the servant came to the king and sat at the place where he used to sit, and the king said, who has given you back your sight? The servant replied, my Lord Allah. The king said, have you got another Lord besides me? The courtier said, my Lord and your Lord is Allah. The king got hold of him and kept tormenting him till he informed him about the boy. He told him about the boy. So the boy was brought. The king said to the boy, has your knowledge of sorcery reached to the extent you cure blind people, lepers, and sick people? The boy replied, I do not cure anybody. It is only Allah who cures. The king got hold of him and kept on torturing him till he informed him about the monk, Faymiyun. And the monk was brought. It was said to him, give up your faith, turn murted, apostate. The monk refused to turn apostate. The king ordered a saw. It was put in the middle of his scalp. and he was sawn until he fell into two pieces. Rahimahullah. Then the servant was brought, and it was said to him, give up your religion. And the servant refused to turn apostate, so the saw was put in the middle of his scalp, and he was sawn, he was cut into two pieces. Then the boy was brought, and it was said to him, give up your religion. The boy refused to turn apostate. So the king ordered some of his courtiers to take the boy to such and such a mountain, saying, then ascend the mountain with him till you reach the top, then see if he turns apostate. If he does, well and good. But if he doesn't, throw him over the top of the mountain. They took him, ascended the mountain, and the boy said, O Allah, save me from them by any means necessary. So the mountain shook, and all of them fell down, and the boy came walking to the king. The king asked him, what did your companions do? The boy said, Allah has saved me from them. Then the king ordered some of his courtiers to take the boy on board a boat to the middle of the sea. He said, if he turns apostate, then well and good. If he doesn't, cast him into the sea. So they took him, and he said, O Allah, save me from them by any way you wish. So the boat capsized, and all of the courtiers were drowned. And the boy came walking back to the king. The king said, what did you do to your companions? And the boy replied, Allah saved me from them. And he further said to the king, you cannot kill me until you do what I command. The king said, what is your command? The boy said, gather all the people in an upland place and fasten me to the stem of a tree. Then take an arrow from my quiver, fix it in the bow, and say, in the name of Allah, the Lord of the boy, and shoot me. If you do that, you will kill me. So the king gathered the people in an upland place, fastened the boy over the stem, took an arrow from his quiver, fixed it in the bow, and said, in the name of Allah, the Lord of the boy. And he shot the arrow. The arrow hit him in the temporal region of the skull. The boy put his hand over the temporal region of his skull at the point where the arrow hit. And then he died. The people then all shouted, we have believed in the Lord of the boy. So they all accepted it. Because remember, the king said, in the name of the boy, right? So the people said, we have all believed in the Lord of the boy. The king came, and it was said, that is the thing which you were afraid of by Allah. The thing which you were afraid of has fallen upon you. The people have believed in Allah. So we ordered deep ditches to be dug at the entrances of the roads. And it was done. And a fire was kindled in those ditches. And the king ordered that whoever did not turn apostate be cast into the ditches. And it was done. Then there came a woman with her baby. She nearly retreated back from the ditch, but the baby spoke, O mother, be patient. You are on the truth. So she threw herself in the ditch along with her child to be a shaheed. In this line, the oft repeated verses that we are reading, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in Surah Al-Buruj, chapter 85. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Was-sama'i dhatil buruj wal yawmil maw'ud wa shahidin wa mashhud. Qutila ashabul ukhdud an-nari dhatil waqud. Idhum alayha qu'ud wa hum ala ma yaf'aluna bil mu'minina shuhud. Wa ma naqamu minhum illa an yu'minu billahi al-aziz al-hamid alladhi lahu mulku as-samawati wal-ard wallahu ala kulli shay'in shaheed. Inna alladhina fatanu al-mu'minina wal-mu'minati thumma lam yatubu falahum adhabu jahannam walahum adhabu al-hariq. Inna alladhina amanu wa amilu as-salihat لَهُمْ جَنَّاتٌ تَجْرِي مِنْ تَحْتِهَا الْأَنْهَارِ ذَلِكَ الْفَوْزُ الْكَبِيرُ. In this first part of the surah, it says, by the heaven holding the big major stars, and by the promised day, and by the witnessing, and by the witnessed day. Cursed were the people of the ditch. Fire supplied abundantly with fuel. When they sat by it, and they witnessed what they were doing against the believers. They had nothing against them except that they believed in Allah, Almighty, worthy of all praise, who to whom belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is witness over everything. Verily those who put into trial the believing men and believing women, and then do not turn in repentance, will have the torment of hell, and they will have the punishment of the burning fire. Verily those who believe and do righteous deeds, for them will be gardens under which rivers flow. That is the great success. And so we see in this the story of Yemen and the story of Najran. And we find that Dhu Nuwas tortured and killed, according to historians, somewhere between 20 to 40,000 people were killed because of their belief in one God. After the slaughter took place, one of the local Arab people who believed in one God, Daus Dhu Tha'laban, escaped on his horse. He rode across the desert until he went north to the Byzantine king, who was the most powerful Christian in the world, because this is now the Jews struggling against the Christians. So he went to the king whose name was Justinian. And Justinian sent a letter to Al-Habasha, to Ethiopia, Abyssinia, to Najashi, to the king. And remember the word Najashi, or the Negus, it is a title. In the same way, Caesar of Rome, and you have Cyrus or Kisra of Persia, you have Fir'aun. Fir'aun is a title in Egypt. There are many Fara'ina. And so similarly, the Negus is actually a title. And so Justinian sent the word to his closest Christian ally. That was the Ethiopians. And he ordered them, he commanded them that they should seek revenge for the people who were killed in Najran. And the Negus sent an army of 70,000 Abyssinians to seek revenge. And he told his general, whose name was Ariyat, he told him, kill 1/3 of the men, lay waste to 1/3 of the country, and seize 1/3 of the women and the children. And so Ariyat crossed the Red Sea with a huge army. And he met the Yemenis, he met Dhu Nuwas, and he defeated it. And the last report of Dhu Nuwas is that after his army was defeated, he rode his horse into the ocean, and he was never seen again. And so Ariyat became the ruler of Yemen, and the Ethiopians seized control of that part of the world. Now remember, the Ethiopians, many of them speak Amharic, which is very close to Arabic. It is a Semitic language. Also, culturally, the people of Ethiopia and Eritrea are close to the people of Yemen. But they were two different areas ruled by two different kings. Ariyat ruled for a number of years until one of his commanders, whose name was Abraha, then came to Ariyat and disputed for power in Yemen. This is a power struggle going on. And Abraha said, instead of our people fighting each other, let me fight against you personally. And Ariyat accepted. Ariyat was a tall, noble man. And Abraha was described as a short man, heavy-set, who did not have very good character. But he was a crafty man. And he met Ariyat in an open field, and he hid his servant on the side. Ariyat took his spear and struck Abraha in the face and split his face. And so Abraha is called Al-Ashram, which means the one with the split forehead. The servant then, after Abraha was hit, the servant appeared, threw his spear, and killed Ariyat. When the news went to Ethiopia, and the Negus, the Najashi, found out about this, he made an oath to God. And he said, by God, I will not rest until I enter the land of Abraha and I cut his forelock, meaning he's going to take off his head. This is the way they used to give their oaths. But Abraha was a crafty man, and he had a plan. He immediately cut off his forelock, and he sent a bag of sand, Yemeni dirt, to Ethiopia. And he wrote a letter, and he said, Aryat was nothing but a slave, and I am also your slave. I will serve you faithfully, and I am better equipped than Aryat. I have defeated him. Take the sand, which is the dirt of Yemen, because you made the oath that you will not rest until you walk on the land of Yemen, this land. So here's the dirt. So you walk on the land. You said you would cut off my forelock. Here is my forelock. And so the Negus, seeing how crafty this man was, accepted him as the ruler of Yemen. And he ruled for a number of years, but he wasn't satisfied with his territory. Reports were coming to him that the Arabs had a house of worship, and they used to make tawaf around it. And it was the most revered holy place in the whole of the Arabian Peninsula. And so he built Al-Qulais, a kanisa, a church dedicated to their gods, and he wanted it to rival the Kaaba. And it was his intention that the people would stop making pilgrimage to Mecca and they would come south to Yemen to the Qulais. And when the word came to the Arabs, one of the Arabs from Banu Kinana rode south, went into the church, and he defiled the church. He went to the bathroom in the church. And those days, that is najasa, that is defiling the church. And he returned to Mecca. When the word came to Abraha, he made his oath that he would destroy the Kaaba itself. And so he outfitted his army with thousands of men and with elephants. And this is very significant to us, because again, these stories are not fairy tales. There is military strategy in this. The last major time elephants were used by Hannibal, who crossed from North Africa into Rome. It was called Carthage at the time. He crossed into Rome and he literally defeated the Romans with elephants. Elephant warfare was not known in the Arabian Peninsula. So as Abraha went north, he defeated every army that he came in front of. Today it would be similar to when the Allied forces, when they first started using tanks, or when they recently used helicopter gunships. They used them in Afghanistan and other parts of the world. It is said that when the Somalis, in the last part of the 19th century, the early part of the 20th century, they rebelled against the Italians. They were uncontrollable people. And so the Italians flew their planes and dropped bombs, and it was the first time in modern warfare that planes were being used to bomb troops, because the Somalis were fighting guerrilla warfare. And so similarly, the elephant was a strategic weapon, because in this type of warfare, your animal has something to do with your victory. And that is one of the reasons why I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the Arabs. And you will see as we go along, because the Arabs were riding special horses, the Arabian horse. And the Arabian steed is a courageous animal. It is the fastest breed of horse. It can also live for long periods of time without water. And it is courageous in battle. And today, when people are gambling and betting on horses, they say, how much Arabian blood is in that horse? And the one with the most Arabian blood, they'll put their money on that. But the Arabian steed was not ready for an elephant. This was another form of warfare. And so Abraha defeated the Yemenis. He went north. He defeated the Arab tribes in Najran, in that area. He went to At-Ta'if, high in the mountains. He defeated the people. He strategically defeated them psychologically. They came out and they submitted. They say, we worship idols. We're like you. And so he defeated them psychologically, and he continued on until he camped outside of Mecca. There, they plundered the countryside. And from the booty, the ghanima that they got were 200 of the camels of Abdul Muttalib, who at that time was the leader of Quraysh, the guardian of the Kaaba. And so Abraha, in the way of the old, he called for the leaders first. Before he attacked the Kaaba, he wanted to see the personality of the Arabs. And so he called Abdul Muttalib. And it is reported that Abdul Muttalib was naturally a noble person. He carried himself in a very noble way. And when Abraha saw this, he respected the way he looked. And so Abraha sat on the rug. And this is giving respect, because usually he would sit above people. But he sat on the rug with Abdul Muttalib. And he said, I'm about to attack your Kaaba. What do you want? Will you negotiate? Abdul Muttalib answered and said, as for me, I am the Lord of these camels, Rabbil Ibil. But for this house has a Rabb. It has a Lord. And that Lord will defend the house. Abraha was upset and he was surprised. All you want is your camels? Take your camels. And Abdul Muttalib and the rest of Quraysh waited. They went to the high parts of Mecca, and the city was deserted. The next day, the Ethiopians faced Mecca, and they tried to go forward, but the camels, when they pointed to the Kaaba, refused to move. The camels kneeled down. They stabbed the camel. They beat the camel. They tried everything. When they pointed the camel south, away, the camel got up and walked. If they pointed it to the right or to the left, away from the Kaaba, it would walk. But you point it to the Kaaba, it kneels down. And so the army was stuck, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent birds. And these birds came, according to many of the mufassirin, from the direction of the sea, and were probably swallows and starlings. Each bird carried 3 stones, size of a very small pebble, 1 in the beak and 2 in their claws. And the birds went to high altitudes and then dropped down the stones on the army of Abraha. Now, we know scientifically that if you go to a high altitude and you drop an object, according to the laws of gravity, that it gains weight and power as it drops. If you went to the top of the Empire State Building in New York City, or the CN Tower in Canada, or that tower in Kuala Lumpur, which is the highest freestanding building, you drop a penny down. You drop, by the time it reaches the bottom, it's like a bomb. And so, using the forces of nature, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent waves and waves of these birds dropping down the pebbles, which is like being bombed by a modern army. And Allah reveals to us in the 105th chapter of the Quran, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, Alam tara kayfa fa'ala rabbuka bi ashabil fil. Alam yaj'al kaydahum fi tadlil wa arsala alayhim tayran ababil tarmihim bi hijaratin min sijil faja'alahum ka'asfin ma'kul. Have you, O Muhammad not seen how your Lord dealt with the owners of the elephants? Did he not make their plot go astray? And he sent against them birds in flocks, striking them with stones of baked clay. And he made them like an empty field of stalks, like corn stalks, which has been chewed up by cattle. And you know when the cattle chews it up and lets it out, then it's like smashed. It's soft and it's smashed. And so literally, the Quran describes the condition of the army of Abraha. It was decimated. And they began to flee south. And it is reported that Abraha himself lost his fingers. And then cuts began to be filled with pus. People were dying at the water holes. And finally, Abraha fell down and his heart burst. And his army was finished. His son took over. and ruled in his place, and then his son's son, until Saif Dhu Yazan al-Himyari went to the rulers, first the Byzantine Romans, and they refused to go south. Then they went to the Persians, to Kisra, and they convinced the Persians to attack, and they attacked Yemen, and the Persians conquered the south of Arabia. This is a very important point to recognize this Persian presence. Some of the historians even look at the word Mogadishu, you know, the capital of Somalia. They say Mogadishu, some of the historians believe that name is Maqad Ash-Shah, Maqad Ash-Shah. And Maqad is like the seat of the Shah, or the ruler of Persia. Because the Persians controlled Yemen, the coastline of Ethiopia, south down to Somalia. They controlled that region for a period of time. And so history tells us that Ethiopian rule in Yemen was for approximately 72 years. But this is an important time for us, and it sets the stage for the coming of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. In the rest of Arabia, it was the time of Jahiliyyah. They originally were believing in one God in the time of Ibrahim alayhi salam, then Ismail alayhi salam. And that belief continued amongst the tribes of Jurhum and the other Arab tribes until the people began to go to idol worship. And it is reported that Amr ibn Luhay, although he was known for righteousness, he brought back an idol from Syria. The idol's name was Hubal. And he brought back Hubal and he put it in the middle of the Kaaba. This is the first recorded time that an idol was being used in the Kaaba. After that, he went to Jeddah. And Ibn Ishaq and many of the historians have reports that say a company of jinn were actually helping him to do this work. And he dug into the ground in Jeddah and he produced some of the ancient idols from way back in the time of Nuh alayhi salam. He produced Manat, the idol called Manat, which was worshipped in Mushallal, a place near the Red Sea. He produced Al-Lat, that was worshipped in At-Ta'if. And he produced Al-Uzza, that was worshipped in the valley of Nakhla. And so these are some of the idols that you hear about. And these idols were brought. And also, with the help of this jinn, he dug up some of the ancient ones, and the specific ones coming from the time of Nuh alayhi salam. He found Wad, Suwa', Yaghuth, Ya'uq, wa Nasr. And you see the Quran mentioning these names. These were buried in Jeddah, and he put them in Tihama, a little bit to the south. And so idol worship then began to spread in the area of the Kaaba itself. And by the time of the Prophet ﷺ, they had reached 360 idols. Every day of the lunar year, there was another idol that was revered and worshipped inside of the Kaaba. And so the Arabs at that time in Jahiliyyah had distinct parts of their personality. They did not have culture in the sense of rugs. They did not have large buildings. They did not have expensive jewelry. But there was something about their actions and their character. And I want to talk about some of the negative features and then some of the positive features. In the negative features, number one, in the time of Jahiliyyah. And we have to think about this ourselves, because there's a tendency for Muslims to go back into Jahiliyyah. And then we have to come into Islam. And so, number one, they had a problem of self-devotion or seeking refuge and praying to the idols. Instead of praying directly to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they used to go through the idol and then ask the idol to ask Allah. And this is very similar. The Hindus will tell you, if you speak to Hindus, they will say, Shiva and Krishna, we don't worship them. That's what they'll tell you. They say we're going through Shiva and we are going through Krishna in order to reach the Great Spirit. And so similarly, the Arabs went through Lat and Uzza and Hubal and these different gods in order to reach the one God who they knew was named Allah. And this is a very important point because some of the enemies of Islam said that the word Allat became Allah. Like that's where the word Allah comes from. And if you look at how the words are spelled, it's just a difference in the ta. Or it's a ha or tar marbuta at the end. So they say Allat became Allah. But this is a lie. And we refute this because the pagans at the time worshipped Allat to get to Allah. So they knew the word Allah even in their Jahiliyyah. Secondly, they would perform pilgrimage to their idols. And sometimes they would make tawaf around the Kaaba with no clothes. They would prostrate to their idols. They would seek favor with their idols through sacrifice. وَمَا ذُبِحَ عَلَى النُّصُبِ. You'll see this in Surah Al-Ma'idah in verse 3. And in Surah Al-An'am, you'll see in verse 136, 138, 139, all over Surah Al-An'am. You will see how the Arabs were sacrificing animals. They were making sacrifices to their gods. And they would bless portions of food, portions of their drink. They would also bless cattle, and they would bring crops. They would dedicate special animals to their gods. Some of the animals, for instance, that were special, if you had a cow or a camel that was female and it gave birth to 10 females in a row, then that is a special animal. So they had certain categories. But when the question came to them, why are you going through these gods? What do these gods mean? If they're people, whether they're people or whether they're trees or whether they're jinn, and they would say, وَمَا نَعْبُدُهُمْ إِلَّا لِيُقَرِّبُنَا إِلَى اللَّهِ زُلْفَى. And you'll find this in chapter 39, verse 3. We worship them only that they may bring us closer to Allah. They also had fortune telling with arrows. They gambled and they drank alcohol, wine, intoxicants. And so their society was a society of polytheism. But some of the good qualities of the Arabs, and this is probably part of the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose them, is that in their character itself, they had strong qualities. Number one, they believe in hospitality. They would keep their promises. They had a strong sense of honor. They had a firm will and determination. They had perseverance. And they had pure Bedouin, simple life. They were truthful and courageous. That was the Arabs in the time of Jahiliyyah. This was the climate. And in the year when the elephants attacked Mecca, called Am al-Fil, that is the year in which our beloved Prophet Muhammad was born. He was born in the year that Abraha attacked the Kaaba. May Allah help us and strengthen us with this knowledge and give us the best of this seerah in this life and the next life. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله.